The lamp had been in the wrong place for 3 days. Eleanor Martinez stood in her bedroom doorway, staring at the ceramic table lamp that had belonged to her late husband. It should have been on the left side of her knitstand, where it had sat for 15 years, but now it perched awkwardly on the right, its cord stretched taut across the wood surface. "I'm 72, not 92, she muttered, shuffling closer to examine it. Her arthritic fingers traced the lamp's familiar roses as she lifted it to move it back to its proper place. That's when she felt it a small, hard object taped to the base. The tiny black device was no bigger than a button, but Eleanor's heart hammered as if she'd discovered a bomb. She'd seen enough crime shows to know what it was. A recording device, hidden in her most private space. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto her bed. The lamp clutched against her chest. The room seemed to spin as memories crashed over her like a tidal wave. She was 8 years old again, standing in her father's study while he held up a small tape recorder, his bloodshot eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "See, Eleanor? I told you I'd catch you in your lies eventually." The child's voice on the recording was her own, tearful and confused. "But Daddy, I didn't take any cookies. I promise I didn't." Her father's laugh had been cruel. "The evidence doesn't lie, little girl, you do." Eleanor's hands shook as she forced herself back to the present. The lamp slipped from her grasp, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. "Eleanor, what happened?" Jessica's voice drifted up from downstairs, sickeningly sweet. "Are you having another episode?" "Another episode." The phrase made Eleanor's skin crawl. For months, Jessica had been using those words whenever Eleanor seemed confused or disoriented. The moments were becoming more frequent times when Eleanor couldn't remember what day it was, or when she'd look at familiar faces and feel completely lost. Jessica always seemed to appear during these episodes, phone in hand, asking gentle questions that somehow made Eleanor feel even more confused. "I'm fine," Eleanor called back, but her voice cracked. She dropped to her knees, carefully picking up the larger pieces of ceramic while her mind raced. If there was a device in her bedroom lamp, where else might they be hidden? Over the next hour, Eleanor conducted a search that would have impressed a detective. She found them everywhere. Behind picture frames, inside artificial flowers, even sewn into the lining of her favorite armchair. 7 devices in total, each one strategically placed to capture her daily routines. With each discovery, Eleanor's breathing became more labored. Her chest felt tight, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. The walls seemed to close in, just like they had in her childhood bedroom when her father would lock her in for telling stories. She stumbled to the bathroom and gripped the sink, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back had wild grey hair and eyes wide with panic. But beneath the fear, Eleanor saw something else, a flicker of the stubborn little girl who had survived Robert Martinez's psychological warfare. "You're not crazy," she whispered to her reflection. "You never were." The sound of the front door opening made her freeze. Marcus's voice carried up the stairs, tired but warm. "Mum, I'm home. How was your day?" Eleanor's heart clenched. Her son, her beautiful, naive son, had no idea what his wife was doing. Marcus worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, trusting Jessica to care for his mother. He'd been so relieved when Jessica offered to move in after Eleanor's minor fall last year, convinced his wife was being selfless. "Fine, honey," Eleanor managed to call back, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. She could hear them talking in the kitchen, Jessica's voice pitched higher than normal. "She had a rough day, Marcus. Broke a lamp upstairs. I'm worried about her confusion spells. They're getting worse." Eleanor's stomach lurched. Even now, Jessica was spinning the narrative. turning Eleanor's discovery into evidence of mental decline. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that Eleanor almost doubted her own perceptions. But the tiny recording device in her trembling palm was real. The systematic placement of surveillance equipment throughout her home was real. The way Jessica's concerned face always appeared during her most vulnerable moments was real. Eleanor sank onto her bed, surrounded by the broken pieces of her lamp and the shattered illusion of her safety. For the first time in months, her mind felt sharp and clear, no longer clouded by whatever was causing her episodes. The clarity was terrifying because it meant accepting an unbearable truth. She was being hunted again. Her father had been dead for 20 years, but the nightmare had followed her home in the form of a smiling daughter-in-law with patient eyes and poison in her heart. Jessica had been studying Eleanor's weaknesses, documenting her vulnerabilities, building a case brick by brick. A soft knock on her door made Eleanor jump. "Eleanor?" Jessica's voice was gentle, concerned. "Marcus is worried about you. May I come in?" Eleanor looked around her room at the broken lamp, the scattered recording devices, the evidence of her violated privacy. Then she looked at the door, behind which stood a woman who had been systematically destroying her sanity with the same methodical precision her father had used decades ago. "Just a minute," Eleanor called, her voice steadier now. She quickly swept the recording devices into a drawer, then opened the door with what she hoped was a confused, fragile smile. Jessica stood in the doorway, her expression perfectly crafted mask of concern. "Oh, honey, you look upset. Are you feeling disoriented again?" Eleanor met her daughter-in-law's eyes and saw the calculation lurking beneath the sympathy. For months, she'd been a mouse in Jessica's maze, running in circles while being watched and recorded. But mice, Eleanor remembered, could bite when cornered. "I'm fine, dear," Eleanor said softly. "Just tired." Jessica's smile widened, satisfied. "Of course you are. Why don't you rest? I'll bring you some tea." As Jessica retreated downstairs, Eleanor closed her door and leaned against it. The little girl who had survived her father's cruelty was still alive inside her. And she was done being preyed on. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She sat in her rocking chair, watching the door and clutching one of the recording devices like a talisman. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every distant sound from Jessica and Marcus's bedroom set her nerves on edge. When dawn finally broke, she heard Marcus's alarm, followed by his familiar morning routine. Shower, coffee, quick kiss goodbye to his wife. The front door closed with a soft click, and Eleanor knew she was alone with her hunter. She waited 30 minutes, listening to Jessica's movements downstairs, the clatter of dishes, the hum of the washing machine, the casual sounds of domestic life that now felt sinister. When Jessica's footsteps finally approached her door, Eleanor was ready. "Eleanor?" Jessica's voice was syrupy sweet. "I brought your morning medications and some chamomile tea. You seemed so agitated last night." Eleanor opened the door, studying her daughter-in-law's face. Jessica looked perfect, as always, blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, makeup applied with precision, wearing the kind of pastel cardigan that screamed, "caring daughter-in-law." But Eleanor had learned to look past the mask. "We need to talk," Eleanor said, stepping aside to let Jessica in. "Of course, sweetie. What's on your mind?" Jessica set the tea tray on the nightstand, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Are you feeling confused again? Sometimes mornings are hard for people with your condition." Eleanor almost laughed at the audacity. "My condition? Well, yes. The memory issues, the disorientation. Marcus and I have been so worried." Jessica's voice carried just the right note of concern, but her eyes remained cold. Dr. Chin thinks it might be early-stage dementia. Interesting. Eleanor held up the recording device. Because I think it might be something else entirely. Jessica's mask slipped for just a moment, flash of something ugly crossing her features before the concerned expression returned. Eleanor, honey, what is that? You tell me, Jessica. I found it in my lamp, along with 6 others throughout my room. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Jessica's hands clasped in front of her, knuckles white. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its saccharine quality. I can explain. Please do. Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, her posture shifting from caring daughter-in-law to something more calculated. Eleanor, you've been having episodes. Serious ones. Last week, you left the stove on for 3 hours. You forgot Marcus's name during dinner. You've been talking to people who aren't there. People who aren't there. Eleanor's voice sharpened. When? Just yesterday, you were having a full conversation with someone named Robert. You seemed terrified. Jessica's eyes glittered with false sympathy. Marcus is worried sick. We needed to document these episodes to show Dr. Chen how serious this is getting. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She had been having nightmares about her father lately. Vivid dreams that sometimes bled into her waking hours. But those moments happened when she was alone, or so she'd thought. You've been watching me dream, Eleanor whispered. We've been trying to help you, Eleanor. But you need more care than we can provide at home. There's a lovely memory care facility. And no. Eleanor's voice cut through Jessica's words like a blade. Absolutely not. Jessica's expression hardened. Eleanor, you're not thinking clearly. This isn't your choice to make anymore. Watch me. They stared at each other across the small room. The pretense finally abandoned. Jessica stood slowly, her movements predatory. You want to know the truth? Fine. You're a burden, Eleanor. A confused, paranoid old woman who's making everyone miserable. Marcus is exhausted trying to take care of you. His work is suffering. Our marriage is suffering. Eleanor felt the familiar dissociation beginning, the way reality seemed to shimmer. At the edges, the way sounds became muffled and distant. It was the same feeling she'd had as a child when her father would corner her, the same protective numbness that had helped her survive. But this time, she fought it. What did you give me? Eleanor demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. What? The medication. The tea. What did you give me to make me confused? Jessica's laugh was sharp and bitter. You think I'm poisoning you? Eleanor, you're having delusions. This is exactly what I mean about your mental state. Show me the bottles. What? The medication bottles. Show me exactly what Dr. Chen prescribed and what you've been giving me. Jessica's eyes darted toward the door. I don't have to justify medical care to someone who's mentally incompetent. I'm not incompetent. Eleanor stepped closer and Jessica actually backed away. I'm medicated. There's a difference. You're being ridiculous. Then show me the bottles. Jessica, show me what you've been putting in my tea every morning. Show me the medical records you've been keeping. Show me the videos you've been taking. Jessica's composure cracked completely. Fine, yes, I've been recording you. Yes, I've been documenting your episodes. Someone has to. Marcus is too blind to see what you've become. But I won't let you destroy his life the way you destroyed your own family. Eleanor felt as if she'd been slapped. What did you say? Your daughter hasn't called in months because she can't stand dealing with you. Your son works himself to death because he feels guilty about your pathetic existence. Everyone who gets close to you ends up miserable, Eleanor. Just like your husband did. The words hit Eleanor like physical blows, each one designed to find her most vulnerable spots. She could feel herself fragmenting, the way she had as a child when her father would list all the ways she was worthless, all the reasons her mother had. "Stop," Eleanor whispered. "Your mother killed herself because she couldn't stand living with your father's drinking and your constant neediness. Did you know that? She chose death over dealing with you for one more day." Eleanor's vision blurred, but through the haze, she saw Jessica's satisfied smile. This was what her daughter-in-law had been building toward, not just documenting Eleanor's confusion, but creating it, nurturing it, weaponizing Eleanor's deepest wounds. "You're good," Eleanor said quietly. "You're very good at this." Jessica straightened, mistaking Eleanor's tone for surrender. "I'm glad you're finally being reasonable. The facility has an opening next week. We can have you moved in by." "No." Eleanor's voice was steady now, clear. "I'm not going anywhere." "Eleanor, you don't have a choice. I have hours of footage showing your mental decline. I have medical records. I have witness statements from neighbors about your erratic behavior. You have evidence of the abuse you've been inflicting on me." Jessica's laugh was genuinely amused now. Who's going to believe a confused old woman over a concerned daughter-in-law? "I've been nothing but patient and caring. Ask anyone." Eleanor looked at Jessica, really looked at her, and saw her father's cruelty wrapped in a prettier package. The same systematic dismantling of reality. The same careful isolation from support systems. The same methodical destruction of self-worth. But Eleanor wasn't 8 years old anymore. "You're right," Eleanor said softly. "A confused old woman wouldn't be believed. But I'm not confused anymore, Jessica. And I'm going to prove it." Jessica's confident smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor held up the recording device. "You taught me something important about collecting evidence. Thank you for that." For the first time since Eleanor had known her, Jessica looked uncertain. "You can't prove anything." "We'll see." Eleanor walked to her door and opened it. "I think you should leave my room now." Jessica didn't move. "This isn't over, Eleanor." "No," Eleanor agreed. "It's not." After Jessica left, Eleanor sank into her chair and allowed herself to shake. The confrontation had taken everything she had, but she'd survived it. More importantly, she'd seen Jessica's true face, and Jessica had seen hers. The war was officially declared. Eleanor's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She sat on her bed, staring at the closed door, Jessica's words echoing in her mind like poison. "Your mother killed herself because she couldn't stand living with your father's drinking and your constant neediness." The room began to blur at the edges, reality shifting like sand. Eleanor knew this feeling, the way the present could suddenly dissolve, leaving her drowning in memories she'd spent decades trying to forget. Usually, she fought these episodes, terrified of the confusion they brought. But now, with Jessica's cruelty fresh in her mind, Eleanor realized she needed to remember. She needed to understand how the past had shaped the present. She closed her eyes and let herself fall. 9-year-old Eleanor crouched in the hallway outside her father's study, watching through the crack in the door as he adjusted the small tape recorder on his desk. Robert Martinez was a meticulous man, even in his cruelty. Every evening he would review the day's evidence, recordings of Eleanor's conversations, notes about her behavior, photographs of her supposed mistakes. "Eleanor, come in here." His voice had been deceptively calm that night. "We need to discuss your lying problem." She'd entered the study on trembling legs, knowing that whatever came next would hurt. Robert sat behind his massive oak desk like a judge, his bloodshot eyes fixed on her with the peculiar intensity that alcohol gave him. "I've been monitoring your behavior, little girl. Do you know what monitoring means?" Eleanor had shaken her head, though she knew. She always knew. It means watching, listening, recording. He'd held up a small device, similar to the one she'd found in her lamp decades later. I've been recording your conversations with your stepmother. Would you like to hear what you sound like when you lie? The playback was devastating. Eleanor's own voice, caught in a moment of childish fibbing about eating a cookie before dinner. But in Robert's hands, that innocent moment became evidence of her fundamental dishonesty, her corrupt nature, her resemblance to her mother. This is exactly how your mother sounded before she lost her mind, Robert had said, his voice clinical. The lying, the manipulation, the constant need for attention. It's in your blood, Eleanor. Bad blood. Eleanor's eyes snapped open, her heart pounding. The memory was so vivid she could smell her father's whiskey breath, feel the scratchy wool of the chair she'd been forced to sit in during his sessions. But now, with adult understanding, she could see what she'd been too young to recognize then. The systematic nature of his abuse, the way he'd used technology to gaslight her, the careful documentation designed to make her doubt her own reality. Just like Jessica. Another memory surfaced, this one more painful. Eleanor was 12, standing in the kitchen while her stepmother Diane packed a suitcase. Her father was at work, and the house felt different charged with the electricity of impending change. "Where are you going?" Eleanor had asked, though part of her already knew. "I can't do this anymore," Diane had whispered, not looking at her. "I can't watch him destroy you the way he destroyed your mother." Eleanor's stomach had clenched. "What do you mean?" Diane had turned then, her eyes red with tears. "Your mother didn't die in a car accident, Eleanor. She couldn't take it anymore. The recordings, the constant surveillance, the way he made her feel like she was losing her mind. She left you a note, but he destroyed it. He said it was better if you thought it was an accident." The words had hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Her mother, beautiful, fragile Maria, had taken her own life, and Robert had covered it up. Had spent years telling Eleanor that her mother died because of a drunk driver, that it was sudden and painless and no one's fault. "Why are you telling me this?" Eleanor had whispered. "Because you're becoming like her. Quiet, scared, always looking over your shoulder. And I can't save you if I stay. He'll destroy me too." Diane had picked up her suitcase, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry." And then she was gone, leaving Eleanor alone with a father who saw her as a project to be broken, a problem to be documented, a reminder of a woman who had chosen death over living with his systematic cruelty. Eleanor pressed her hands to her face, feeling tears leak through her fingers. The parallel was so clear now it took her breath away. Jessica wasn't just copying her father's methods, she was perfecting them. The recordings, the isolation, the medical manipulation, the way she turned Eleanor's own family against her. It was the same playbook, updated for a new generation. But there was something else in the memory, something that made Eleanor's chest tighten with a different kind of pain. After Diane left, Eleanor had searched her father's study, desperate to find some trace of her mother's final words. She'd found the destroyed note in his wastebasket, torn into dozens of pieces. Working through the night, she tried to reconstruct it, but only fragments remained. "My darling Eleanor, not your fault. So sorry. Be stronger than me. Don't let him make you disappear." The words had been scattered, incomplete, but they'd planted a seed of truth that Robert could never fully destroy. Her mother had loved her, had seen her, had tried to save her even in death. Eleanor opened her eyes, focusing on the present moment. The afternoon sun slanted through her bedroom window, casting familiar shadows across the floor. She was 72 years old, not 12. She was not her mother. And she was not going to disappear. Another memory surfaced. This one from her teenage years. Eleanor was 16, standing in the bathroom mirror, practicing normal expressions. She'd learned to hide her fear, to smile when expected, to give the responses that would keep Robert calm. The girl in the mirror looked hollow, her eyes too old for her face. "I won't be like this forever," she'd whispered to her reflection. "Someday I'll get out. Someday I'll be safe." But even as she'd said it, Eleanor had known that escape wasn't enough. The damage was already done, carved into her bones like initials in a tree. She'd learned to flinch at unexpected sounds, to scan rooms for exits, to interpret every expression for signs of danger. She'd learned to doubt her own perceptions, to question her own memories, to accept that she was fundamentally flawed. Most dangerously, she'd learned to attract people who would continue the work her father had started. Eleanor stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The insight was devastating and liberating at the same time. She hadn't consciously chosen Marcus because he was weak or Jessica because she was cruel. But her trauma had made her vulnerable to exactly this kind of manipulation. She'd been primed for it, trained for it, shaped by decades of systematic abuse to accept treatment that a healthier person would have rejected immediately. Jessica had seen that vulnerability and exploited it with surgical precision. But here was the crucial difference. Eleanor's mother had been isolated, cut off from support, convinced that she was losing her mind. Eleanor still had fragments of a support system: Dr. Chen, her daughter Carmen, neighbors who might have noticed something wrong. She had resources her mother never had. And unlike her mother, Eleanor had survived Robert Martinez's abuse. She'd escaped, built a life, raised children, loved and been loved. She was not the broken little girl cowering in her father's study. Realization filled Eleanor with a fierce, clean anger. Jessica thought she was dealing with a confused old woman, someone too weak and isolated to fight back. But Eleanor had fought worse monsters than Jessica and won. She walked to her dresser and pulled out a small photo album, pictures of her mother. Her real mother, not the sanitized version Robert had created. Maria Martinez looked back at her. From the pages, young and beautiful and full of life, that Robert had systematically extinguished. "I'm not going to let her win, Mama," Eleanor whispered to the photograph. "I'm going to be stronger than both of us." Outside her window, she could see Jessica in the garden, playing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law for the neighbors. But Eleanor could see through the performance now. She knew what Jessica was, and more importantly, she knew what she herself was. A survivor. The war was just beginning. Eleanor waited until she heard Jessica's car pull out of the driveway before reaching for the phone. Her hands were steadier now, purpose replacing panic. She'd made an appointment with Dr. Chen for the next morning, claiming she needed to discuss her medication, but she couldn't wait that long. She needed answers now. "Dr. Chen's office, this is Maya speaking." "Maya, this is Eleanor Martinez. I need to speak with Dr. Chen urgently. It's about my medications." There was a pause. "Mrs. Martinez, your daughter-in-law called yesterday to discuss your condition. Dr. Chen increased your lorazepam dosage as she recommended. Are you having side effects?" Eleanor's blood chilled. "Jessica called you?" "Yes. She was very concerned about your increasing confusion and anxiety. She said you'd been having episodes of disorientation and paranoia. Dr. Chen felt it was appropriate to adjust your medication to help you feel more comfortable." "Maya, I need to speak with Dr. Chen immediately. This is an emergency." 20 minutes. Later, Eleanor sat in the familiar leather chair across from Dr. Sarah Chen, who looked concerned and slightly confused herself. Dr. Chun had been Eleanor's physician for 8 years, and Eleanor had always trusted her completely. Eleanor, I have to say, you seem much more alert today than Jessica described. She was very worried about your mental state. Eleanor pulled out a small notebook where she'd been tracking her symptoms. Dr. Chun, I need you to tell me exactly what medications I'm currently taking and what Jessica told you about my condition. Dr. Chun opened Eleanor's file, her expression growing more troubled as she read. According to Jessica, you've been having significant cognitive decline over the past 6 months. Forgetting names, losing track of time, having conversations with people who aren't there. She was particularly concerned about your increasing paranoia and your belief that people were watching you. What medications did you prescribe based on her reports? You're currently on lorazepam for anxiety, increased from 0.5 milligrams to 2 milligrams daily. Quetiapine for sleep disturbances. And we added risperidone last month when Jessica reported you were having hallucinations. Eleanor felt the room spin. Risperidone? That's an antipsychotic, isn't it? Yes, but it's also used for behavioral symptoms in elderly patients with dementia-like conditions. Eleanor, are you saying these symptoms aren't accurate? Eleanor leaned forward, her voice intense. Dr. Chun, I found recording devices hidden throughout my bedroom. Jessica has been watching me, documenting my behavior, and I believe she's been enhancing my confusion with medication. Dr. Chun's expression shifted from concern to alarm. Eleanor, that's a very serious accusation. Are you certain about the recording devices? Eleanor pulled one of the small devices from her purse. I found 7 of them. And I need to know, could the combination of medications you've prescribed cause confusion, memory problems, and disorientation? Dr. Chun stared at the device, then back at Eleanor. May I examine this? After a thorough inspection, Dr. Chun set the device on her desk, her professional demeanor barely containing her shock. This is definitely a recording device. And to answer your question about the medications, yes, the combination you're on, especially at these dosages, could absolutely cause the symptoms Jessica described. Eleanor's suspicions crystallized into horrible certainty. So if someone wanted to make an elderly person appear confused and paranoid, these medications would do it. Eleanor, what you're describing is a form of medical abuse. If Jessica has been misrepresenting your symptoms to obtain prescriptions. Dr. Chun trailed off, the implications sinking in. Tell me about the side effects of what I'm taking. Dr. Chun pulled up a reference on her computer. Lorazepam at 2 milligrams daily can cause confusion, memory impairment, and cognitive dulling, especially in elderly patients. Quetiapine can cause sedation, dizziness, and disorientation. Risperidone can cause cognitive slowing and, paradoxically, increased confusion in some patients. Eleanor felt a mixture of rage and relief. So I'm not losing my mind. I'm being drugged. If what you're telling me is true, yes. Eleanor, I need you to understand something. Jessica presented herself as your primary caregiver. She had detailed notes about your behavior, specific examples of incidents, and she seemed genuinely concerned about your well-being. She requested to be included in all medical decisions regarding your care. What kind of incidents? Dr. Chen hesitated, then opened her notes. She reported that you left the stove on for hours, that you forgot Marcus's name during dinner, that you were having conversations with deceased family members. She brought in what she said was a recording of you talking to someone named Robert, claiming he was in the room when no one was there. Eleanor's heart pounded. She recorded me having nightmares about my father and told you they were hallucinations? She said you were awake during these episodes, that you seemed to be responding to someone she couldn't see. She was very convincing, Eleanor. She had dates, times, detailed descriptions of your behavior. Because she was creating the behavior with medication and then documenting it. Eleanor's voice was bitter. Dr. Chen, I need to stop these medications immediately. We'll need to taper you off gradually to avoid withdrawal symptoms. Eleanor, if what you're saying is true, this is criminal. You need to report this to the authorities. Who's going to believe me? A confused old woman against a concerned daughter-in-law with medical documentation. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, clearly struggling with the situation. Eleanor, I have to ask, is it possible you're having paranoid thoughts as a result of the medication? Sometimes these drugs can cause the very symptoms they're meant to treat. Eleanor had expected this question. Dr. Chen, you've known me for 8 years. Have I ever shown signs of paranoia or delusional thinking before Jessica moved in? No, never. You've always been sharp, articulate, and grounded in reality. And how do I seem to you right now? Dr. Chen studied Eleanor's face carefully. You seem more alert and coherent than you have in months. Your speech is clear, your thinking is organized, and you're asking the right questions. Because I didn't take my morning medication. For the first time in months, my head is clear. Dr. Chen made notes in Eleanor's file. I'm going to start reducing your medication immediately. We'll cut the lorazepam in half and discontinue the risperidone entirely. The quetiapine will taper more slowly. What about Jessica? She notice if I'm not as confused. Eleanor, you need to understand something. If what you're describing is accurate, Jessica has been committing elder abuse, medical fraud, and possibly assault. This isn't a family matter, it's a criminal matter. Eleanor felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. She said she has hours of footage showing my mental decline. She's been building a case to have me declared incompetent. Based on symptoms she created with medication, she convinced me to prescribe. Dr. Chin's voice was tight with anger. Eleanor, I need to document everything you've told me. I also need to report this to Adult Protective Services. Will that help or make things worse? It will start an investigation. But Eleanor, you need to understand Jessica is very convincing. She's been building this narrative for months, and she's done it skillfully. Fighting this won't be easy. Eleanor thought of her mother, isolated and desperate, with no one to turn to. Dr. Chen, I need to ask you something. In your professional opinion, could someone use these medications to systematically break down an elderly person's mental state? Unfortunately, yes. What you're describing is a form of chemical restraint abuse. It's more common than people realize, especially in cases where someone wants to gain control over an elderly person's finances or living situation. Jessica mentioned a memory care facility. Doctor nodded grimly. If she could get you declared incompetent, she could have you institutionalized against your will. With the medical documentation she's helped create, it would be very difficult to fight. Eleanor stood up, feeling stronger than she had in months. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen. Eleanor, I want to help you, but you need to understand the risks. Jessica will likely escalate her behavior when she realizes you're becoming more lucid. People who engage in this kind of systematic abuse don't just stop when confronted. I know. I've dealt with someone like her before. Dr. Chen handed Eleanor a card. This is a social worker who specializes in elder abuse. Her name is Patricia Vance. I'm going to call her and explain the situation. Eleanor, you're not alone in this. As Eleanor left the office, she felt a mix of vindication and terror. She'd been right about Jessica's manipulation, but knowing the truth and proving it were two different things. Jessica had been building her case for months, and Eleanor was just starting to fight back. But for the first time in months, Eleanor's mind was clear, and she intended to use that clarity to destroy Jessica's carefully constructed lies, one piece of evidence at a time. Eleanor's hands trembled as she dialed Carmen's number for the third time that day. Each call had gone straight to voicemail, just like they had for the past 4 months. She'd assumed her daughter was busy with her job in Seattle, but now, with her mind clearing from the medication fog, Eleanor began to suspect something darker. "Mama?" Carmen's voice was breathless, as if she'd run to answer the phone. "Oh my God, is everything okay? I've been so worried." "Carmen, honey. What do you mean worried? We haven't talked in months." There was a long pause. "Mama, I've been calling you twice a week. Jessica always answers and says you're sleeping or having a bad day. She said you told her you didn't want to talk to me because I upset you." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Carmen, I never said that. I've been trying to call you for months." "What?" "But Jessica said," Carmen's voice cracked. "She said you were getting worse. That talking to me made you agitated and confused. She said Dr. Chen recommended limiting your contact with people who might stress you out." "Carmen, Jessica has been lying to both of us. She's been intercepting our calls, keeping us apart." "I need to see you. Can you come home? I can be there by tomorrow night." "Mama, what's going on?" Jessica made it sound like you were like you were disappearing. Eleanor felt a familiar rage building in her chest. "I'm not disappearing, baby. But someone's been trying to make me disappear. I'll explain everything when you get here." After hanging up, Eleanor sat in the kitchen, staring at the phone. Jessica's manipulation was more extensive than she'd imagined. How many other connections had been severed? How many people had been told she was too sick to maintain relationships? A soft knock on the back door interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, holding a casserole dish and looking concerned. "Eleanor, honey, I brought you some arroz con pollo," Mrs. Rodriguez said when Eleanor opened the door. "I've been worried about you. Jessica said you weren't feeling well enough for visitors, but I haven't seen you in your garden for weeks." Eleanor's heart ached. Maria Rodriguez had been her closest friend for 15 years, ever since Eleanor and her late husband had moved to the neighborhood. They'd shared countless cups of coffee, tended their gardens together, and weathered various life crises side by side. "Maria, please come in. I need to talk to you." Mrs. Rodriguez set the casserole on the counter and studied Eleanor's face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised 6 children and buried 1 husband. "You look different today. More present. What has Jessica been telling you about me?" "She says you've been having memory problems, that you get confused about who people are. She told me you forgot my name last week and got upset when I tried to remind you." Mrs. Rodriguez frowned. "But you seem fine to me right now." Eleanor felt a surge of hope. "Maria, I need to tell you something important, and I need you to really listen." For the next hour, Eleanor explained everything: the recording devices, the medication manipulation, Jessica's systematic campaign to isolate her from everyone she cared about. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interruption, her expression growing, more alarmed with each revelation. "That Bruya," Mrs. Rodriguez muttered when Eleanor finished. "I knew something was wrong. Jessica would come to my house with these stories about you being confused, that they never sounded like the Eleanor I know. And the way she'd smile when she talked about how worried she was, it never reached her eyes. You believed her, though." "At first, yes. But then I started noticing things. Like how she'd always be there when you were having these episodes. How she'd discourage me from visiting when you were supposedly having good days. And the way she'd talk about that memory care place too enthusiastic, you know? Like she was excited about it." Eleanor leaned forward. "Memory care place?" "She showed me brochures, said Marcus was considering it. She wanted to know if I thought it was a good idea if I'd noticed your decline." Mrs. Rodriguez's voice turned bitter. "I told her you seemed fine to me. And she said that was because you were having one of your lucid moments. She's been building a case, Maria. Getting everyone to agree that I'm incompetent. Well, she didn't convince me. I've been watching that woman for months, and I don't like what I see. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up decisively. What do you need me to do? Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Would you be willing to write down what you just told me? About the things you've observed? Of course, but Eleanor, you need to be careful. If Jessica realizes you're fighting back, she already knows. We had a confrontation this morning. Mrs. Rodriguez's face went pale. Ay, Dios mío. Eleanor, you can't stay here alone with her. Come stay with me until your daughter arrives. I can't leave Marcus. He doesn't know what she's really like. Then we need to make sure he finds out quickly. Eleanor was about to respond when she heard Jessica's car in the driveway. Mrs. Rodriguez immediately moved to the window, positioning herself where she could observe without being seen. She's on her phone, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. She looks angry. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Through the window, she could see Jessica pacing beside her car, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. Even from a distance, Eleanor could see the tension in her daughter-in-law's posture. I should go, Mrs. Rodriguez said, but Eleanor caught her. No, please stay. I want you to witness whatever happens next. Jessica entered through the front door, her footsteps sharp against the hardwood. When she appeared in the kitchen doorway, her smile was strained and didn't reach her eyes. Eleanor, I see you have company. Maria, how nice to see you. Jessica. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was cool. I was just bringing Eleanor some dinner. She seems much better today. Oh, that's wonderful. Eleanor has good days and bad days, you know. We never know which Eleanor we're going to get. Jessica's laugh was brittle. I was just at the pharmacy picking up her medications. Dr. Chun adjusted them again. Eleanor felt a chill. What medications? Just your usual ones, dear. You know, how forgetful you get about these things. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped closer to Eleanor. Eleanor seems very sharp today. We had a lovely long conversation about her garden plans for next spring. Jessica's expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of something ugly before the concerned mask returned. That's wonderful, but I hope you didn't tire her out. Too much stimulation can be overwhelming for someone in Eleanor's condition. What condition is that exactly? Mrs. Rodriguez asked, her voice deceptively mild. Well, the memory issues, the confusion episodes. Just yesterday she was convinced someone was watching her. It's heartbreaking, really. Eleanor watched Mrs. Rodriguez's face carefully. Her friend's expression remained neutral, but Eleanor could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was filing away Jessica's words for future reference. I should let you two get settled, Mrs. Rodriguez said finally. Eleanor, remember what we talked about? About your garden. She squeezed Eleanor's hand meaningfully. I'll check on you tomorrow. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Jessica turned to Eleanor with an expression that was no longer even pretending to be kind. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Eleanor, but it needs to stop. Dr. Chun called me about your appointment today. She's concerned about your paranoid delusions. Eleanor felt her heart skip. Dr. Chun called you? Of course she did. I'm your medical advocate, remember? She told me about your wild accusations, your claims about recording devices. She's very worried about your mental state. Eleanor stared at Jessica, confusion washing over her. Had she misread Dr. Chun's response? Had the doctor been humoring her while planning to report back to Jessica? She's increasing your medication again, Jessica continued, pulling a pharmacy bag from her purse. And she wants to see you again next week to discuss residential care options. Eleanor's world tilted. Either Jessica was lying, or Dr. Chun had betrayed her trust. Either way, she was more isolated than she'd thought. The medication is necessary, Eleanor. Dr. Chen is concerned that without proper treatment, you might become dangerous to yourself or others. Jessica set the pills on the counter, her smile returning. Now, why don't you take your evening dose and get some rest? You've had a very stimulating day. Eleanor looked at the pills, then at Jessica's expectant face. In that moment, she understood that this was a test. Jessica was gauging whether Eleanor would comply, whether the morning's confrontation had truly changed anything. Eleanor picked up the pills, met Jessica's eyes and smiled. Of course, dear. Thank you for taking such good care of me. Jessica's smile widened, satisfied. That's what family is for. But as Eleanor walked toward the sink, she palmed the pills instead of swallowing them. She would not be drugged into submission again. The war was escalating, and Eleanor was learning to fight dirty. Eleanor lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling as her mind cleared further from the medication fog. For the first time in months, she felt truly awake, and with that awareness came memories she'd spent decades trying to suppress. She was 8 years old again, standing in the hallway of their old house, watching her mother through the crack in the bedroom door. Maria Martinez sat on the edge of the bed, holding a piece of paper and crying silently. Eleanor had never seen her mother cry before Robert didn't allow it. "Mama?" young Eleanor had whispered. Pushing the door open, Maria had quickly hidden the paper, wiping her eyes. "What is it, mi amor? Why are you sad?" Her mother had pulled her close, holding her with desperate intensity. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm just tired." But Eleanor had seen the truth in her mother's eyes, the same hollow exhaustion she now recognized. In her own reflection, Maria Martinez had been disappearing long before she died, worn away by Robert's systematic cruelty until nothing remained but a ghost going through the motions of living. Now, with adult understanding, Eleanor could see what her 8-year-old self had missed. The paper her mother had been holding, it must have been a suicide note. Her mother had been planning her escape even then, carefully considering her words, trying to find a way to explain the unexplainable to a daughter who would be left behind. Eleanor sat up in bed, her heart racing. She'd spent her entire adult life believing her mother was weak, that she'd given up too easily. But now she understood the truth. Maria Martinez had been fighting a battle she couldn't win, against an enemy who used love as a weapon and family as a battlefield. Robert had recorded their conversations, just as Jessica recorded Eleanor's. He'd isolated Maria from her family, claiming they were bad influences. He'd convinced doctors that Maria was mentally unstable, that she needed medication for her hysteria. He'd turned their young daughter into an unwitting spy, asking Eleanor to report on her mother's behavior. Eleanor remembered now the way Robert would question her after spending time with Maria. What did Mama say today? Did she seem confused? Did she say anything about wanting to leave? Eleanor had answered innocently, not understanding that she was providing ammunition for her father's psychological warfare. Every childish report, "Mama forgot to make lunch today," "Mama was crying in the garden," had been weaponized against her mother. The pattern was so clear now it took Eleanor's breath away. Jessica had used Marcus the same way, turning him into an unwitting accomplice. "Your mother seems confused," Jessica would say. "She forgot your name at dinner. She was talking to herself in the garden." And Marcus, loving and concerned, would report these incidents to Dr. Chen, never realizing he was helping to build a case against his own mother. Eleanor rose from bed and moved to her dresser, pulling out the small jewelry box where she kept her most precious possessions. Hidden beneath her wedding ring was a fragment of paper, the only piece of her mother's suicide note that she'd been able to save. The words were faded now, written in her mother's careful handwriting. Not your fault, mi amor. Be stronger than me. Don't let him make you disappear. Eleanor's hands shook as she held the fragment. Her mother had known what Robert was doing to her, had recognized the systematic destruction of her identity. But she'd also known that Eleanor was strong enough to survive what she could not. Don't let him make you disappear. The words echoed in Eleanor's mind as she thought about Jessica's plan. The memory care facility, the legal documents, the systematic erasure of Eleanor's autonomy. It was the same goal Robert had achieved. With Maria, just through different means. Both abusers wanted the same thing: to make their victims disappear, to erase them so completely that resistance became impossible. But Eleanor had survived Robert's attempts to destroy her. She'd escaped, built a life, raised children who loved her. She'd proven her mother's faith in her strength was justified. The realization that followed was devastating and liberating in equal measure. Eleanor had unconsciously sought out Marcus, partly because his gentle nature reminded her of her mother's softness. She'd been trying to save Maria through her son. But in her determination to protect Marcus from the harsh realities of life, she'd made him vulnerable to exactly the kind of predator who had destroyed her mother. Jessica had seen Marcus's kindness and Eleanor's protective instincts, and she'd exploited both. She'd presented herself as the solution to Eleanor's fear of being a burden, offering to be the strong daughter-in-law who would care for his aging mother. But like all predators, Jessica had been patient, waiting until Eleanor was vulnerable. Before revealing her true nature, Eleanor walked to her window and looked out at the garden, where her mother had spent her final days. Maria had planted roses there, tending them with the same desperate care she'd shown her daughter. After Maria's death, Robert had torn out the rose bushes, claiming they were too much trouble. But Eleanor had replanted them years later, when she'd inherited the house, creating a living memorial to her mother's love. Standing there in the moonlight, Eleanor felt her mother's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. Maria Martinez had been defeated by her abuser, but she'd saved her daughter through sheer force of will and love. She'd planted seeds of strength in Eleanor that had taken decades to fully bloom. "I see you now, Mama," Eleanor whispered to the night air. "I see what you went through. I see how strong you really were." The tears came then, not the confused, medicated tears of recent months, but the clean grief of understanding. Eleanor cried for her mother's suffering, for the years of believing Maria was weak, for the way trauma had shaped her choices without her conscious awareness. But she also cried with relief. The cycle could be broken. Jessica might be using the same playbook as Robert, but Eleanor was not her mother. She had resources Maria never had, knowledge her mother couldn't access, and most importantly, she had survived one master manipulator already. Eleanor returned to bed with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow Carmen would arrive. Tomorrow, she would begin the real fight to reclaim her life. And this time, she would not disappear. She would not let Jessica win what Robert had already lost. The kitchen was quiet the next morning, too quiet. Jessica had left early, citing errands and some important paperwork she needed to handle before Marcus's shift ended. Eleanor watched her drive away from behind the living room curtains, the palmed pills from the night before still hidden in her pocket. With Jessica gone, the house felt breathable again. She opened windows. She let light in. She drank coffee, without the bitter aftertaste of sedative-laced tea. For the first time in what felt like ages, she moved without feeling observed. Then she got to work. She started by printing Dr. Chen's updated medication list and notes, then copied down her own documentation of symptoms versus dosages in a small blue notebook she kept tucked beneath her cardigan. After that, She called Mrs. Rodriguez and asked her to come over briefly before lunch. "I'm bringing my notary friend," Maria had said. "We'll write everything down while it's fresh." By noon, Eleanor had 2 witness statements copies of her prescription history and a tiny plastic bag containing the 7 recording devices she'd collected from her bedroom. She placed them all in a shoebox and labeled it in thick marker. "If anything happens to me." At 4:32 p.m., Marcus came home. Eleanor watched from the window as he got out of the car, shoulders heavy under the weight of a double shift. He walked with the same loping gait she remembered from when he was a boy. It hit her how tired he looked, not just physically but emotionally worn down. How much of that was Jessica's doing? She wasn't sure yet how to tell him the truth, but the house, for once, was on her side. He came through the back door, dropped his keys and leaned against the counter, rubbing his temples. "Rough day?" Eleanor asked gently. Marcus startled. "Mom, I didn't know you were in here." "I thought I'd make us some soup." He smiled faintly. "You didn't forget the stove, did you?" The joke landed like a slap. "No," Eleanor said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Not today." He didn't notice her pause. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to. That had become his habit lately, coexisting beside her, instead of with her, letting Jessica interpret everything. "Jessica said you've been doing better," he added as he sat down at the table. "She said you even talked with Mrs. Rodriguez yesterday." "I did. We talked about the garden." Marcus blinked. "She said you were confused, kept calling her someone else." "No, Marcus, that didn't happen." He frowned, uncertain. "Jess said." "I know what Jessica said." Eleanor walked slowly to the table, placing 2 bowls of soup down. "But you haven't heard what I've said." He looked at her warily. "Okay, then tell me." Eleanor sat, fingers curling around her spoon for grounding. "Marcus, I need you to listen to me, really listen. Don't explain. Don't defend. Just hear me." He nodded. And so she told him, not everything, just enough. The pills, the cameras, the appointment with Dr. Chun. How her confusion cleared. When she skipped her doses, she watched his face the entire time, measuring every flicker of doubt, every flash of horror. When she mentioned the hidden recording devices, his expression shifted. "There were cameras in your room." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Audio only. 7 of them." He stood suddenly and started pacing. "Why would she do that?" "She said she was trying to help. She said you were getting worse, that you were unsafe." "She said the same about my mother once," Eleanor interrupted. "So did my father." "Jessica isn't the first person who's tried to make me disappear, Marcus. But she might be the last." He froze. "You think she's trying to get rid of you?" "I think she already has. Just not legally yet." Marcus sank into the chair across from her, hands trembling. I don't know what to believe." "You believe what you see. You believe the woman sitting in front of you. You believe your own mother." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Upstairs, a sudden sharp ping broke the silence. The sound of Eleanor's phone, left on her nightstand. "I'll get it," Marcus said, grateful for the escape. Eleanor didn't stop him. A moment later, she heard him call out, "Mom, you need to see this." She climbed the stairs slowly, heart thudding. He stood frozen by her bed, her phone in his hand, the screen glowing. Someone had just sent a video link. Marcus tapped it. A grainy recording began to play. It was her, curled on the couch in the middle of the night, eyes wide, whispering under her breath, Don't tell him what you saw." Her voice sounded small, broken. In the background, Jessica's voice murmured, "Who are you talking to, Eleanor?" She didn't respond, just stared at the wall, rocking slightly. "This is what I mean," Jessica's voice said to the camera. "She's completely lost touch." The video ended. Marcus stared at the screen, then at her. "That's how she showed you to Dr. Chun?" he asked hoarsely. Eleanor nodded. "She sent it to me, probably by accident." He sank onto the bed. I remember that night. You told me you couldn't sleep. Jessica said you were just tired, and that you'd had too much tea." Eleanor sat beside him. "Do I seem like that now?" "No, God no, you seem like you." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he looked at her, eyes wet. "What do you need me to do?" And there it was, the shift. Eleanor reached for his hand. "Believe me, that's the first step. Then we get the rest of the truth out." Marcus swallowed hard. "She'd come after you harder now." "I know," Eleanor whispered. "But she's not the only one who can keep records." Jessica came home later than usual that night, her hands full of groceries and her smile pasted on like a prop. Marcus met her at the door, standing straighter than he had in weeks. Eleanor watched from the hallway, out of sight but within earshot. "Hey, babe," Jessica said brightly, pecking his cheek. "Long shift?" "Yeah," he said, not returning the kiss. "Long day." Jessica paused, then turned toward the kitchen. "I bought your favorite penne arrabbiata. Figured we'd have a nice dinner, just the three of us." Marcus followed her slowly, folding his arms across his chest. "Before dinner, I need to ask you something." Eleanor heard the plastic crinkle as Jessica set the bags down. "Sure, what is it? Have you been recording my mom without her consent?" Silence. A heartbeat too long. Marcus, what are you talking about?" He held up Eleanor's phone. "The video. The one you sent her." Jessica laughed softly, the sound carefully calibrated. "Oh, honey, that was for Dr. Chun. You know that. I was just documenting." "Documenting?" Marcus cut her off. 7 hidden devices in her bedroom, Jessica. In her lamp. In the armchair. Behind the picture of Dad. Her voice sharpened. "She told you that?" "Marcus, she's paranoid. She's been accusing me of things for weeks, things that aren't real. She hasn't taken her medication today." Jessica's expression flickered. "Exactly, you see? She's unstable. No, she's clear. Clearer than I've seen her in months." Jessica took a step toward him, her smile wilting. "Marcus, you're tired. You've been working so much. And while I've been working, you've been drugging my mother and building a case to have her declared incompetent." His voice trembled. "Was any of it real? The concern? The care? Or were you always angling for control?" Jessica's tone turned cold. "I'm the one who has been keeping this house running, who's been managing her doctor's appointments, cleaning up after her messes, doing everything while you worked your precious night shifts. You think you're in the position to judge me now?" Eleanor stepped into the room, her presence quiet but undeniable. "You don't have to manage me anymore, Jessica." Jessica turned to her like a cornered animal. "Stay out of this." "No," Marcus said. "She's in this now. All the way in." Jessica's face darkened. "You think anyone's going to believe her over me? I've been the primary caregiver. I've got the doctor's notes, the video evidence, the neighbors. You think a woman with night terrors and hallucinations is going to take me down?" "I don't have to take you down," Eleanor said calmly. "The truth will," Jessica scoffed. "The truth? That you've been delusional and deteriorating for months. That I've held this family together while you spiral." Eleanor opened a manila folder and set it on the table. This is a notarized witness statement from Mrs. Rodriguez. And this, she produced another folder, is Dr. Chin's adjusted report, with notes about medication abuse. We've already spoken to a lawyer. Jessica's smile collapsed. Eleanor kept going. And we've scheduled an appointment with Adult Protective Services. Tomorrow. You're welcome to come. Marcus stood beside his mother now, his jaw clenched. Jessica's eyes darted between them. Calculating. So what, you're going to sue me? Kick me out? Destroy your marriage over a confused old woman's revenge fantasy? Eleanor stepped forward, her voice quiet but resonant. This confused old woman used to believe she didn't deserve protection, that people like you were just part of life. But not anymore. Not again. Jessica turned to Marcus, her voice suddenly syrupy. You're not really going to let her turn you against me, are you? After everything? He looked at her, eyes steady. I think you should leave tonight. Go stay at your sister's, or a hotel, until we figure out the next steps. Jessica stared at him, stunned. You can't be serious. But he didn't blink. I am. I'm your wife. I know, he said. And I'll deal with that. But right now, I need to deal with my mother. Jessica's jaw clenched, her voice barely a whisper. You'll regret this. And with that, she stormed upstairs. Eleanor exhaled slowly, her legs nearly giving out. Marcus caught her elbow, steadying her. You did good, Mom. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Same. They laughed, just a little. Later that night, Jessica left without another word. The front door slammed. Her perfume lingered behind like a warning. Eleanor and Marcus sat in silence on the couch. I need to know something, he said finally. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Eleanor stared at the carpet. Because I didn't believe myself. He nodded slowly. And, she added, because I thought you loved her more than me. Marcus's eyes filled, but he didn't speak. They sat together until the clock struck midnight. And for the first time in months, the house felt still, not empty, not safe yet, but still. The next morning, Eleanor stood outside the law office of David Park, a quiet but sharp elder abuse attorney recommended by Dr. Chin's social worker. The intake meeting was long, emotional, and exhausting. She handed over the recording devices, the statements, and a copy of her current prescriptions. Mr. Park skimmed her notes, then looked up. Mrs. Martinez, what you're describing is a textbook case of medical, psychological, and financial abuse. If we move forward, you'll need to be prepared for a fight. Eleanor nodded. I've been fighting since I was 8 years old. I just didn't know it counted back then. Eleanor opened the front door to the scent of cinnamon and fried dough. Mrs. Rodriguez stood on the porch with a plate of freshly made churros and a look that said she knew everything. I figured you could use some sugar and company. She sighed, stepping inside. Eleanor smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. You figured right. They sat at the kitchen table, dipping churros into hot chocolate. The room still held shadows of Jessica's present sterile surfaces, organized cabinets, everything just so. But for the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt as if the house belonged to her again. She's gone for now, Eleanor said. Marcus asked her to stay elsewhere. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. He's a good man. He just needed to open his eyes. They were shut tight. They were stitched shut, Mrs. Rodriguez corrected. By that snake. Eleanor exhaled. It's not just the manipulation. It's how subtle it was. The way she'd say I forgot a name when I hadn't, or rearrange things and then told. Marcus' eye was slipping. Even I started believing it. You're not alone in that, Maria said. But you're awake now. That counts for something. That afternoon, Eleanor made a list. At the top, people Jessica had isolated her From Dot, it was longer than she expected. Carmen, a Rodriguez family, Pastor Miguel from the church, her old friend Claudia from the senior center, even the woman who used to walk her dog past Eleanor's garden and bring her clippings from her lavender bushes. Jessica had told her she was too tired for visitors. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table and wrote letters, real ones on notepaper, with violets in the corners. One by one, she reached out. The first to respond was Pastor Miguel. He showed up on Saturday morning, silver cross tucked under his collar, eyes full of quiet concern. "We missed you," he said, clasping her hands. Eleanor led him into the living room and told him everything. Not in the shaky, half-apologetic way she used to describe things, but clearly, with the calm of someone who'd finally remembered her own voice. When she finished, Pastor Miguel leaned back. Jessica always seemed polished, over-eager, but we assumed she was just anxious to help. She was helping herself, Eleanor said. To my future. He stayed for tea, and when he left, he took with him a copy of Dr. Chen's letter and one of the audio devices Eleanor had collected. "For your safety," he said gently. "If she returns and tries to paint you as unstable to the church or community, we'll have the truth." Later that day, Carmen arrived. Eleanor barely had time to open the door before her daughter wrapped her in a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," Carmen whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it." Eleanor held her close. "You saw what she wanted you to see. That's what she was good at." They sat on the back porch. The scent of earth and roses thick in the air. Carmen looked around the garden. "These look beautiful. Have you been out here?" "I started again. After I stopped the meds." Carmen nodded slowly. "You were disappearing, Mama. Like you were underwater, and I couldn't reach you." "I know," Eleanor said softly. "I couldn't reach me either." For hours they talked about the house, the pills, the isolation, about Maria and Dr. Chen and the Lauya. Eleanor showed her the shoebox of evidence. Carmen took photos of everything and promised to back them up. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, Carmen reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "You don't have to fight this alone anymore." The next Sunday, Eleanor stood at the back of the small church where she'd once led community Bible studies. She wore her navy blue dress, the one with the pearl buttons Maria had given her for her 60th birthday. The congregation turned. Whispers rose, but then Pastor Miguel stepped forward. "Welcome back, Mrs. Martinez," he said, his voice full and warm. "You've been missed." Applause broke out, gentle, hesitant, but real. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. For months, she had been convinced the world believed Jessica's version of her. Senile, confused, dangerous. But now, one by one, that narrative was being undone. Not with grand speeches or revenge, but with truth. With people willing to listen. After service, the woman with the lavender bushes came up to her. "I'm so glad you're okay," she said. "Jessica told me you were ... not yourself. But I had a feeling something was off." "You were right to trust your instincts," Eleanor said. "Next time you stop by, bring some cuttings. I'd like to start again." That evening, back at home, Carmen prepared dinner while Marcus fixed a squeaky cabinet door. Eleanor watched them from the kitchen doorway, a quiet smile forming. Jessica was still out there, and the legal battle hadn't even begun. But for the first time in months, Eleanor felt a net beneath her stitched from neighbors, church members, her children, and her own rediscovered courage. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Rodriguez. "The women from the prayer group want to come over and talk. They're angry, and they bring empanadas." Eleanor replied with 3 words. "Tell them welcome." She closed the phone and sat back in her chair. The war wasn't over, But the circle was forming. And this time, she was not alone. It happened on a Tuesday. The day had started gently. Carmen humming while folding laundry. Marcus leaving early for a hospital conference. Eleanor had even smiled when she stepped into her garden and found the first rose blooming, one of her mother's heirloom varieties. A soft pink, defiant against the heat. But by mid-morning, the air had shifted. Eleanor was alone, sitting at the kitchen table with her notebook open, organizing the timelines and symptoms she'd been tracking. The shoebox of evidence rested beside her. She was about to call her lawyer when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, Jessica stood on the porch. Not polished, not smiling. Her eyes were bloodshot, hair tangled, wearing an oversized sweater that didn't belong to her. "I need to come in," Jessica said flatly. Eleanor didn't move. "No." Jessica looked past her. "I just need my laptop. And some documents. You'll have to come back when Marcus is home." Jessica's expression twitched. "He won't talk to me. You turned him against me. You did that yourself." Jessica stepped forward. "Don't play the martyr, Eleanor. You think people actually believe you? You think anyone buys this frail old woman turned warrior act? I've spent months laying the groundwork, doctors, neighbors, church, even your daughter." Eleanor gripped the edge of the door. "And I've spent the last 3 weeks undoing it." Jessica's lip curled. "You're pathetic. You think you've won something just because your memory isn't leaking out your ears anymore. It won't last. The minute they realize you're unstable, they'll put you away." "I'm not unstable," Eleanor said softly. "But you are." Jessica's hand shot out and slammed against the doorframe. Eleanor flinched. "You think you're better than me? I've seen what you were. A mess. A burden. You couldn't even keep your own husband alive. He died taking care of you." Eleanor's world blurred. "You're wrong," she whispered. "Am I?" Jessica leaned in close. "You didn't even notice when your mind started slipping. You just smiled and made tea. That's the sad part, how easy it was to make you doubt yourself." Something cracked inside Eleanor. She saw not Jessica's face, but Robert's. The same sneer. The same poison. "You're just like her," Jessica hissed. "Your mother. Weak. Fragile. Self-pitying." Eleanor's knees buckled and she fell back against the hallway wall. The pressure in her chest was unbearable. Her breath shortened. Her ears ringing. She was 8 again. Standing in the study as her father loomed above her. Playing recordings on loop. Tears aren't proof. Behavior is. This is your fault, Eleanor. She was 12 again, watching Diane leave with a suitcase. He's going to break you like he broke her. She was 16 again, staring at the mirror, mouthing the words, "I won't be like this forever." And now she was 72. Back in her own home, crumpling against the wall while another predator whispered lies in her ear. Her vision swam. She slid to the floor. Her fingers clawed at her cardigan, heart hammering like a trapped bird. Her mind blurred, sounds distorting, her sense of self unraveling at the edges. She was drowning. "Mama." Carmen's voice tore through the fog. Eleanor felt arms around her. Steady, real. Jessica stepped back, startled. She just collapsed. I didn't do anything. Get away from her," Carmen shouted, kneeling beside her mother. Eleanor couldn't form words. Her body was shaking. Her teeth chattered. Carmen held her tightly. "It's okay, Mama. I'm here. I've got you." The room blurred in and out of focus. Jessica's voice grew distant, defensive. "I just wanted my laptop. She's overreacting. This is a panic attack. She's faking." Then a new voice. cut in sharp, authoritative. "Ma'am, step away from them." Eleanor blinked through the haze. 2 uniformed officers were in the doorway. Behind them stood Mrs. Rodriguez, holding her phone like a weapon. "She barged in," Maria said, her voice trembling. "I heard yelling from across the street. I called 911. Jessica turned on her. "You nosy old," one officer stepped between them. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you outside." As they escorted Jessica out, Eleanor finally exhaled. Breath was ragged, shallow, but it was her own. Carmen stayed with her, rocking her gently, whispering the words Eleanor had once said to her after a childhood nightmare. "It's over, Mia. You're safe now." But even as the house quieted, Eleanor knew it wasn't over. Later that night, after the ambulance had cleared her for stress-induced trauma, and Jessica had been taken to the station for questioning, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed. Dr. Chun called personally. "She tried to access your file this morning," the doctor said, her voice tight. "Claimed you'd given her renewed medical proxy." Eleanor closed her eyes. "And we locked the file. And I've submitted the formal report to a PS. This is criminal now, Eleanor. She may face charges." "Good," Eleanor said. "But..." Her voice sounded hollow. After she hung up, she looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. The breakdown had come, but she was still here. And for the first time, she knew what to call what had been done to her, not confusion. Not hysteria. Abuse. And now it had a name. It could be fought. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. Eleanor sat on the long bench outside courtroom 4B, Carmen on one side and her attorney, David Park, on the other. Her fingers fidgeted with the charm on her bracelet, Maria's old silver cross, now dulled with age. She'd worn it like armor. Jessica sat across the hallway, flanked by a new lawyer, slick, expensive, and visibly annoyed. Her face was calm, but her eyes never stopped scanning. Calculating. It had been a week since the police report, 3 days since Adult Protective Services formally opened a case, and only hours since Eleanor had read Jessica's petition to the court, request for temporary conservatorship, filed before her breakdown, filed as a preemptive strike. "She knew we were coming," David murmured. "She tried to beat us to the punch. But now we have the recordings, the medication list, witnesses," Carmen said. "We're not walking into this empty-handed." Eleanor exhaled. "She's very good at looking innocent." David smiled faintly. "So am I when I need to." Inside, the courtroom was modest. No towering judges or gavel slams, just a hearing room with sterile carpet, a clerk, a quiet judge, and a few rows of pews. But it felt heavier than any space Eleanor had entered since her father's study. Jessica's attorney made the first move. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my client has provided extensive documentation regarding Mrs. Martinez's cognitive decline, videos, physician reports, statements from concerned community members. Mrs. Martinez's recent behavior, including a public panic attack requiring medical attention, only reinforces our concern for her well-being." Eleanor sat still, her spine stiff but unmoving. "She was diagnosed with early-stage dementia," he added, "and has demonstrated consistent symptoms of paranoia, disorientation, and emotional instability." David Park stood. "With all due respect, Your Honor, Mrs. Martinez's symptoms were drug-induced, caused by unauthorized manipulation of prescribed medications, reported directly by her physician, Dr. Sarah Chun. We have the updated medical records." He handed the judge a folder. David continued, his voice even, calm. "Mrs. Martinez was subjected to surveillance within her own home. We have 7 recovered recording devices. We have screenshots of texts and voice memos sent by Ms. Bennett, recordings selectively edited and sent to friends, doctors, and even clergy. He paused. But the unedited recordings which we submitted this morning tell a different story. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have them here? David nodded. May we play one? The clerk wheeled a laptop forward. David pressed play. The courtroom filled with Eleanor's voice. No, I'm not confused. I remember your face. Jessica's voice followed, icy. You're paranoid, Eleanor. This is why we're doing this. Then Eleanor again. You've been recording me in secret. A pause. Jessica. And who's going to believe you? The audio stopped. Eleanor sat frozen. Carmen's hand found hers under the table. Jessica's lawyer cleared his throat. Taken out of context, that could mean, we also have an affidavit from Dr. Chen, David interrupted, stating that Ms. Bennett misrepresented symptoms in order to gain access to antipsychotic medications that worsened Mrs. Martinez's cognitive state. We have dosage logs, pharmacy pickups, and phone transcripts. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. Miss Bennett, would you like to respond? Jessica stood. Your Honor, she said, voice trembling just slightly. I was trying to help. Marcus was overwhelmed. Mrs. Martinez she was declining. I panicked. I made decisions that might have been misguided, that they came from a place of love. Eleanor stared at her, stunned. The performance was flawless, voice cracking just enough. Gaze lowered humbly, tone soft and trembling. But the judge didn't blink. And the financial withdrawals? He asked. Jessica hesitated. We have records, David said calmly. Over $12,000 siphoned from Mrs. Martinez's account over a 6-month period. Much of it redirected to a personal account in Ms. Bennett's name. Jessica's lawyer whispered something frantically. I was managing her expenses, Jessica said quickly. Groceries, prescriptions, household repairs, none of which were documented, David said. And none of which Mrs. Martinez authorized. The judge turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Martinez, would you like to speak? Her heart pounded. She stood slowly. My daughter-in-law made me feel like I was losing my mind, she said. Every time I forgot something, she was there to remind me. Every time I hesitated, she told others I was unstable. I started to believe her. She paused, letting the silence settle. I've survived abuse before. As a child. I know what it looks like. I just never thought I'd see it again. Wearing my husband's wedding ring. Even Jessica flinched at that. I'm not asking for revenge, Eleanor said. I'm asking for protection. For myself. For others like me. And I'm asking for my life back. She sat down. The judge's expression didn't change, but he closed the folder slowly and gave a single nod. I'm denying the petition for conservatorship, he said. And I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for further review. Based on the evidence presented, there is reasonable cause to investigate charges of elder abuse, fraud, and unlawful surveillance. Jessica's breath caught. Her lawyer visibly deflated. Court adjourned. Eleanor didn't smile, not yet. But her shoulders dropped. Her breath deepened. Outside the courtroom, Marcus was waiting. He didn't speak. He just wrapped his arms around his mother and held her. Carmen stood beside them, her voice firm. It's over. Eleanor shook her head. No, she whispered. But now it can begin. The house was quieter now. Jessica's things had been boxed and taken away by a moving service she hired through a lawyer Eleanor would never meet. The bedroom down the hall, once filled with pastel cardigans and curated smiles, was empty. Sanitized. As if she'd never lived there at all. Eleanor stood in the hallway, watching Carmen tape up the final box. "Does it feel better?" Carmen asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. Eleanor didn't answer right away. "It feels like silence," she said. "Not peace yet, but silence." That afternoon, she had her first therapy session in over 30 years. Patricia Vance, the social worker Dr. Chen recommended, had connected her with a trauma therapist who specialized in elder abuse survivors. The woman, Dr. Layla Navarro, was soft-voiced but firm, with kind eyes that didn't flinch when Eleanor spoke of recordings and broken trust. "You don't have to remember everything," Dr. Navarro said gently, "but you do have to name what happened." "I wasn't confused," Eleanor whispered. "I was poisoned. On purpose." "Yes," Dr. Navarre nodded. "And that's where healing starts. When we say what it was." For weeks, Eleanor had lived in a fog of anger and fear, too focused on survival to grieve. But now that the threat had been pulled from her home, the real pain was surfacing. She wept in that first session. For her mother. For the child she'd been. For the son who hadn't seen her. For the years of conditioning that taught her to apologize for existing. Dr. Navarro didn't interrupt. She handed Eleanor tissues and let her speak until the silence was sacred. That night, Carmen made arroz con leche and curled up beside her mother on the couch, like she used to as a little girl. "You stopped telling me stories when I turned 13, Carmen said. "Do you remember that?" Eleanor looked down at her hands. "Your father had just died. I think I didn't know how to tell stories anymore. You used to make them up. About the garden. About Mama Maria planting roses that only bloomed when she was happy." Eleanor smiled through the ache. She always wanted roses. Robert wouldn't let her have them. "But you replanted them." "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "I had to." Carmen leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "Tell me one now." So, Eleanor did. She told a story about a garden filled with broken things, cracked pots, wilted blooms, scorched soil, and a woman who refused to stop planting. Who believed that even in the aftermath of cruelty, beauty could return. When the story ended, Carmen's eyes were wet. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "No," Eleanor replied. "I'm just finally allowed to be." The next morning, Eleanor sat across from Marcus at the kitchen table. The same table where Jessica used to bring her tea. The same table where Eleanor once doubted her own thoughts. "I was blind," Marcus said, his voice low. "I let her build a prison around you and called it care." "She knew what she was doing," Eleanor said. "And so did my father once. You didn't." Marcus looked up. "How did you forgive him?" "I didn't," Eleanor said honestly. "I outlived him, and I made sure his story ended with me." He nodded. "I want to help fix what I broke. You can't fix it, but you can hold space for it. That's enough." That week, Eleanor received a call from a woman named Doris, an elderly neighbor from 3 streets down. She'd heard through Maria Rodriguez that Eleanor had been through something. Her own daughter, she said quietly, had been pressuring her to sell the house, had taken over her prescriptions, had changed passwords. "I don't know if I'm imagining it," Doris said, "or if I'm just getting old." Eleanor's spine straightened. "You're not imagining it. Come over, I'll make coffee." One visit became 3, then 5. By the end of the month, Eleanor had connected with 5 women from the church. All seniors, all quietly scared. Some of them had signs of manipulation. Others just wanted someone to talk to who wouldn't tell them they were crazy. Together, they created a small group, a place to meet every Sunday afternoon in Eleanor's sunlit living room. They called it Silver. Dignity. Carmen made flyers. Pastor Miguel offered to host one meeting a month at the church. Dr. Navarro agreed to speak to the group about warning signs of psychological and financial abuse. Eleanor didn't speak at first. She listened. Then, slowly, she began to share. Not about Jessica, not at first, but about the ways you can be trained to ignore your instincts, about the power of being believed, about the difference between being alone and being lonely. One of the women, a retired nurse named Joan, began crying after Eleanor's first talk. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. "It never is," Eleanor said. "That's how they win. They make you think you're the only one." That evening, after everyone had left, Eleanor walked into her garden. The moon was rising. Her mother's roses swayed gently in the wind. She knelt beside the softest one, pale cream, edged with blush, and placed something in the soil. The last of the recording devices, wrapped in a cloth. Buried deep, she whispered a prayer. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for clarity, for peace, for all the women past and present who had been made to question their own minds. She stood slowly, brushed the dirt from her knees, and looked up at the stars, not erased, not confused. Just here. Alive. 6 months later, Eleanor stood behind a lectern, palms steady against the wood, as soft afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the community center. Her voice carried through the room, not loud, but clear, steady. "My name is Eleanor Martinez," she began, "and I survived a kind of violence that rarely leaves bruises. It leaves doubt and silence." The audience, a mix of elders, caregivers, and young social work students, sat hushed. I was 72 years old when I realized someone I trusted was slowly erasing me. Not by force, not with fists, but with pills and doubt and the careful rewriting of who I was. She paused, letting the words settle. People assume abuse ends with childhood. That if you've survived your father's cruelty, or your husband's silence, or your mother's fear, you've paid your dues. But that's not how trauma works. Sometimes it finds you again wearing a prettier face. In the front row, Carmen sat proudly, notebook in hand. Beside her, Pastor Miguel, Maria Rodriguez, and Dr. Navarro. Even Marcus had come, shifting nervously in his chair, still rebuilding, still showing up. Eleanor continued. "I was told I was confused, that I forgot names, that I was hallucinating. But it turns out I was being medicated into forgetting, into silence." She opened the small violet notebook she'd kept through the ordeal. "I wrote things down when I didn't trust my memory. I tracked my symptoms, my feelings, my own voice. That's how I began to remember who I was." Her eyes swept the room. "To those of you who work with elders, listen when they whisper. Not all confusion is illness. Sometimes it's a sign that someone has been making them feel confused on purpose." A ripple moved through the crowd, some nodding, some wiping tears. "Since then, I've helped others do the same. Our group, Silver Dignity, meets every week, and every week we remind each other. Confusion isn't always a symptom. Sometimes it's a story waiting to be believed." The room stood in applause, not thunderous, but full of reverence. Afterward, Eleanor stepped outside into the crisp air, flanked by Carmen and Marcus. Across the parking lot, an elderly woman hesitated beside the entrance, nervously holding a flyer. Eleanor crossed to her gently. "First time?" she asked. The woman nodded. "My daughter says I keep forgetting things, but I'm not sure if it's me or her." Eleanor's heart clenched. "Come inside. Let's talk." The woman blinked back tears. Really?" She took the woman's arm. That night, back at home, Eleanor sat at her bedroom window, looking out at The roses. The bushes had bloomed early this year, riotous with life, fragrant and defiant. She opened the drawer of her knitstand and took out a small envelope. Inside, the torn fragment of her mother's suicide note. She'd kept it all this time, faded and yellowed, the handwriting barely visible. Not your fault. Be stronger than me. Don't let him make you disappear. Eleanor pressed the paper to her heart. I didn't disappear, Mama, she whispered. And I'm not done. In the kitchen, her phone buzzed with a message from Doris, the first woman she'd helped. He moved out. I'm safe. Thank you. Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. She reached for her pen, opened a fresh page in her notebook and began to write. Dear younger me, you were never broken. You were silenced. But silence can be unlearned. And now we speak. And we teach others to listen. She signed it. With love and pride, Eleanor. The house was quiet. But this time, it was a good kind of quiet. The kind that held space for everything yet to bloom.